I don't like looking at old photos. And it's not because I hate reminiscing about the past or don't have any meaningful memories. It's just that every time I do, I get sad. I could be a 10-year-old kid holding up a Happy Meal with one hand and a cheeseburger in the other, sitting in front of a McDonald's play place. But if you showed me that photo today, I wouldn't be able to feel the same as the kid in the picture. Because even if it's a feeling I'll never forget, it's also a part of my life that's forever gone. The certain smells, the shoes I was wearing, the people around me, the Happy Meal that I had, none of it is ever going to be the same again. That's why it's nostalgic, because all I can ever do is look back on it. So whenever I do come across old photos or try to talk about the good times, it's hard for me not to get sad, because then I start to wonder if I really lived those moments truthfully with no regrets. Especially with how important and beautiful they are to me 5 or 10 years down the line. And I worry that I'll never experience anything like that again, because things always seem better back then than they are now. There's a show that just finished airing called Kowloon Generic Romance, and not only does it show that same somber side of nostalgia, but it also shows how beautiful it can be and why we're so captivated by it. Even the art style has a very nostalgic tone to it. It reminds me a lot of the early 90s and what shows used to look like back then. And the actual story takes place in Hong Kong, inside the walled city of Kowloon, which also has quite a nostalgic history for a lot of people. Kowloon Walled City was the most densely populated city in history. The entire city was only around 6.4 acres. But this small city at one point was home to more than 33,000 people. And I think understanding a bit of its history will help explain what made this place so special. Kowloon Walled City was first constructed right after the First Opium War between Britain and China in 1842, with Britain gaining control over Hong Kong Island. And because of that, China built a wall that enclosed a very small part of Kowloon right on the outskirts, where they could oversee and reinforce their borders with military settlements next to Britain's new territory. But a second Opium War broke out, and that's when Britain took over the southern part of the Kowloon Peninsula in 1860, which would later lead to them signing a 99 lease with China for new territories by 1898. But there was one small detail in their new treaty. Britain would leave the walled city of Kowloon untouched. The architecture of this place was incredible, and it had to be given how small of an area it was. There were hundreds of hidden alleys that took you across the entire city, stairs and narrow pathways that started from the deep undergrounds to the 14th floor of the tallest building. You didn't even need to be underground to get from one building to the next, because everything was intertwined and connected door after door. The whole city was active 24/7. Every turn and every street was filled with life, from food vendors to shops, businesses, communities, apartments. Everything you ever needed was found in just a few steps. If you didn't grow up in Kowloon Walled City, it just wasn't possible to navigate your way around, which is why it was pretty much left untouched by the Chinese government for so long. Not even the government officials knew how the city worked or what to do with it. And so, as cool as this place was and how incredible its architecture came to be, bad living conditions were pretty much inevitable. And one of the main reasons for that was because the city was always in complete darkness. If you didn't live on the outer or very inner parts of the city, the only way you could see the sun was by having access to a roof, which many people didn't. The city didn't even have their own official source of electricity. Residents had to steal it from nearby areas and outside the walled city. That's why whenever you look at older photos and old videos of Kowloon Walled City, you see these long wires covering up the skies and being bundled up on every single building complex. There were no regulations on electricity for the longest time. One small spark and this entire city would have been burnt down. On top of that, water pipes were constantly leaking, and people had to bring umbrellas everywhere they went. Not only was there low hygienic standards in the city, it was also a very dangerous place. The low rent attracted a lot of squatters. There were unlicensed doctors selling medication, open black markets that were selling illegal drugs, and the local streets were run by the Chinese Triad gang. And these living conditions were only exponentially getting worse and worse, to the point where the Chinese government could no longer just ignore it. And eventually the walled city was completely demolished in 1994, leaving only a monumental park to hold its legacy. But if the living conditions were this bad, why is Kowloon Walled City often remembered as this beautiful and lively place? Why do some people wish to go back, and for those who never lived in a city, wish they could have experienced what others had here? What makes it nostalgic? Well, I think the answer to those questions are beautifully painted throughout the story of Kowloon Generic Romance. The story begins by introducing two characters, Kudo and Kujidai, both who work in the same real estate company in Kowloon, and we're briefly shown what the walled city looks like from the inside. Yellow stains cover up the cement walls, there are alleys filled up with mold, long stairways that tower over the entire city, and fans in every building complex attempting to blow away the humid summer of Hong Kong. And even though this is just a small glimpse of Kowloon, to Kudo, every person, every building, and every street means so much more than we could ever imagine. Every little part of the city is filled with nostalgic memories, because this was his home. Kujidai, however, is a little different. She doesn't have any memories of her past, and it's a mystery throughout the show of how her life in Kowloon even began. She doesn't know how she got here or why she's living the life she has right now, almost like she was just living to replace someone else entirely. And for that reason, she doesn't feel as strongly towards the walled city as Kudo does. To her, this was just another city, and there wasn't anything special about it. She hasn't spent enough time here to know what that looks like, at least not to the same standards as Kudo. Throughout the show, you see a lot of shots that simply show Kudo looking down at the city, pointing out and admiring every little thing from above. And whenever he does, Kujidai is right there beside him. But instead of looking at the city, she looks at him. And only then can you notice that there's a sense of envy coming from Kujidai as her eyes pan towards Kudo when he looks at Kowloon. And that's a feeling that I know a lot about. Whenever someone shares something about their past or tells me about how nostalgic a certain memory, place, or dish is to them, sometimes I get a little jealous or even sad. And that's because it's something that I can't relate to. And oftentimes that jealousy prompts me to think how I might be missing something that I never had. But don't get me wrong, even though jealousy has a negative connotation to it, I think there's a case where it's quite the opposite. I think being envious of someone's nostalgic views just shows how genuine your desire is in wanting to know more about someone. You want to experience the same things, you want to indulge more in their culture, you want to be a part of those moments because you know how important they are to them. There's a moment where Kudo tells Kujidai that nostalgia is the same as love. And I think that's a perfect way to describe it. There's a saying that goes along the lines of, change can't exist in the past. And you know, everyone's heard that phrase before, and everyone knows how frustrating and sad that can be. Because we all have mistakes that we wish we could go back and change, moments we would have done differently, and problems that we could have prevented. But at the same time, I think there's comfort in that. Because along with all your mistakes and everything in your past, there's bits and pieces of happiness scattered in between. And since change can't exist in the past, that happiness will always be there, protected and unchanged. That's why nostalgia is similar to love. Nostalgia is something we can always rely on to remind ourselves that happiness exists. And our past is proof of that. So if you're able to share that part of yourself with someone else, it only makes it more valuable. Kudo wants to show Kujidai all his favorite food stalls. He wants to take her through all these different alleys and streets in Kowloon. He wants to introduce her to all the people he grew up with because these are the things that make him happy. And he wants to share that with someone else because love and nostalgia are meant to be shared. And I think that's what gives Kowloon Walled City this nostalgic feeling for so many people, even if you've never lived there. Its history, all the stories it held, the shared experiences, and the memories that people had of this place were at one point only obtainable in this small city. But as people started sharing their nostalgia of Kowloon and telling others about their stories and what this small city meant to them, bits and parts of Kowloon started to spread throughout the entire world. So even if Kowloon Walled City is completely demolished, the nostalgic memories that people had of this place remain protected for everyone to remember.